I'll begin. So the session tonight will approach the issue of the weaker in society. And if we look back towards the biblical times, the one who was weak was as it is today. It's a socio-economical setting that one is in. And the lowest in the rank is one who doesn't have anything, one who has no home, one who has no way to care for themselves. My wife was just telling me that she's become active in a board just to hear the situation of refugees that have come to Israel, for example. And we don't realize these are people whose husbands they had to leave their husbands and their fathers and grandfathers in the Ukraine because they were not allowed to leave, and they're fleeing for their lives, literally. And thank God that many countries are opening their doors. And Europe has hopefully learned its lesson, and the world from shutting its doors previously, and now opening towards those in need, and understanding that it doesn't mean that that's a political standpoint that you must take in order that going and caring for others should be beyond that. So we'd like to take this, obviously it's something which is in our minds and our prayers for all of us. And we'd like to take the discussion back towards the biblical sources and then see some of the sources. And Rav Yair and I will learn together, and you're welcome to join in with any reflections you may have as well. But maybe Rav Yair, if we bring you, I'd like to bring you into this discussion even before we begin seeing the sources. And maybe something which is a question, or we can leave it open, but I'd like, maybe we can begin for that. We were, for so many years, we were the persecuted. We were the ones who were the ones who needed caring for, and running for our lives and resetting our lives from one community to another. And now, thank God, we're in a position in which both as communities, we have stable communities, hopefully. I mean, the Ukrainian Jewish community thought they were stable as well, just till not so long ago. But do you feel that there's a change in the sense of responsibility out there? It's an open question. Maybe we can start from there.
I can tell you, now we can see the most difficult part that we are coming to, that we are not only as Jews, we have a very difficult situation, because in all the crises until now, we could say that we're not part of. If it's Syria or Lebanon or a thing in the area, then it's clear that we can't open our gates in Israel, because the situation around is very complicated. Suddenly, when it comes to another state, then it's you can see that the debate in Israel is not easy. Like, everyone thinks that we need. Lots of people think that we need to help, but you don't have a complete support, and that's the greatest challenge that I think every people have when you go from what we could call me'akoch el ha'poal. It's one thing to talk about how you're supposed to do it. The thing is something completely different when you do it, or if you don't do it. I'm very happy that right now Europe looks like doing the right thing, but I can't say I can give all the compliment that you gave. I think we do it mainly because it's our own neighborhood, and I'm not sure that we would have done it if it was from further away. It's I think it's a huge challenge. I would, but I want to continue something else that you said before about the weakest in society. It's very clear that the question of is someone taking care for this person is an essential question in I think in the modern society and in general, that also takes us a bit out of the regular regular boxes that we like. Maybe the best example was what happened with the slaves in the U.S. That right after they were freed, they found out that no one takes care of them, and there were much more. There were so many people who died, and because no one took care of them, like the situation of people who no one cares about, people who no one takes responsibility of. That's really the most crucial and hard situation that we have in our society, and that is the place where we need to come forward and do something. And I'm not sure that we always we always do.
One element that I think also comes through in terms of the week, many times we can say, and I think we were discussing it also a while ago in the mitzvah of tzedakah, that there are conditions of who you should give charity to. In other words, it's okay to make sure that someone is asking you for charity, then it's okay to check the person's background, especially if it's a substantial sum that you're giving that person. And we discussed that before.
Except in Purim. Remember that. Purim is next week. In Purim, you don't ask. Whoever takes his hand out, then you have to give. Don't forget it. It's next week. So very important halacha.
So Purim, as you're saying of Yair, it says, Kol poshet yad notnim lo, whoever outstretches their hand. And that is very symbolic because many times we don't outstretch our hand, and we need a little push in order to do so. There's a story, a famous story of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, who goes and he takes his wagon and his Hasidim, and they go to, and he says, we're going on a journey. And they were used to going on a journey with him. They end up at a person's house. And at the end in the poorest section of this shtetl in this town, they end up and they knock on the door, and this poor person opens up, and the Baal Shem Tov says, pushes himself forward, and he says, can we stay here? So the person doesn't have a choice, and he says, where are you from? They say, he says, we're from Mezhibush. He says, I can't believe it. You mean you actually saw the Baal Shem Tov with your own eyes? And the Baal Shem Tov says to everyone else, silences them, don't say anything. And they stay there. And this person literally has nothing to eat. His kids have nothing to eat. And he gives them, and the Baal Shem Tov asks for a meal. And then he says, I'm hungry, can I eat some more? And everyone there is ashamed, but he says, here, everyone has to eat. And over days, he ends up drinking all of the milk from the cow, and then the person goes and sells his cow until a few days later, there's literally nothing left. And the Hasidim are very ashamed. They don't know what's going on. And then the Baal Shem Tov, a few days later, says, you know what, we can go now. And and they start leaving, and they don't even want to look at their master. They don't understand what has happened. And then he says to them, I know what you're thinking. I'll tell you the story. It says this person, it was decreed for him in heaven that he would be very rich, that he deserved to be rich. But he never asked for it, so they could never give it to him. So I had to bring him to the point. He was always so happy with everything that he had that he never asked God for anything. So I had to bring him to the point in which he finally asked, and now he will finally get what he deserves. So maybe that connects to this idea of kol poshet yad notnim lo, that you must outstretch your hand. But on the other hand, to bring it back to our discussion today, the fact that we are giving, and I think we're going to see this in the sources today, has nothing to do with the person, with being judgmental of the person itself. It's like two separate things. The fact that someone has, for example, run away as a slave, they've run away and they belong to their master, and they run away. You still have a mitzvah to care for them, as we're going to see soon. The fact that someone comes to you and is in need doesn't have to do with the fact that, on the other hand, okay, well, if you're talking about how can I help this person in the long term, maybe I can help them get a job, maybe there's other ways. But in general, it's a question of, as the Torah says directly, do not close your hand, right? Do not close your heart in that sense.
Yeah, I think it's a good. Let's go to the sources so we can also speak about how it looks from the from that view.
So, Rav Yair, you can begin with the first source. Would you like to?
Yeah, so the first source comes from Deuteronomy, from Dvarim. לא תסגיר עבד אל אדוניו אשר ינצל אליך מעם אדוניו. You should not turn over to the master a slave who seeks refuge with you from that master. Such individuals shall live with you in any place they may choose among the settlements in your midst, wherever they please. You must not ill-treat them. Yeah, I never heard the word ill-treat, but lo tonenu. So, and this source is one of the, it's a very famous source that was used also, I think, in Christian societies with those Quakers and such that were very known in the States for these aspects of saving slaves from the masters and so on. I think a very interesting point of view that actually many rabbis read these verses out of their context in the text, which comes after a long, many different examples of a situation of war. We don't need to read now all the chapters before, but trust me when I say that all the discussion, all the halachot, the rules that come in the Torah before that, are rules that are had something to do with war. So many rabbis understand this particular these particular sentences, psukim, as directly connected to people who flee war. Now, to flee war, there are two different aspects. It's one thing can be the people who are under threat in a war, but it can also be people, for example, who run from army service, who are supposed to fight in a fight they don't want. Maybe a very good example for what happens today in Ukraine. As far as we hear, no one really understands what. We don't really know because it feels like everything is propaganda, regardless who is the one who say it. But it feels like there's the stories we hear about many Russians who fight in the army and feel that they fight a war they didn't want to go to, and these people used to probably also at that time to flee their duties of fighting in a war. I can definitely understand people who didn't really get anything. Many of them were slaves, like people were sold and such, and then they have to fight a war and die in a war of masters they don't care about, and so on. So we have here verses that are directly connected to that, but we can of course also understand it from the aspect of the slaves and masters that are not allowed, that don't bring a slave back to its master. So we have both the literally example, but also the connection. In any way, when you talk about people who flee.
Also, the even with the issue of the slaves itself, in the Torah, we have different types of slaves. But many times when we think of slaves, we think of people who are there against their will. But we also have a case of a slave in the Torah, for example, someone who's paying off his debt, someone who stole, didn't have how to pay his debt. So it's, in a sense, he's indebted for an amount of years, and that's also called slavery. And so in the sense, it could be that the slave running from his master is not someone who is even taken forcibly. it's part of the system or the social system of the time, that, and he is running away from that. And he's had it, basically, he's running away from his debts. It could be that is a case as well. But in the second pasuk that you brought, that you read, I
I
find,
think before
yeah,
before you go to the second pasuk with the content, how you take care of him, I have to add something about this rule, because many argue, I don't know if it's right, but there are many who argues that this is a very revolutionary a rule of the Torah, that compared to all other laws of the time, it's the first known law that had this idea of not giving you the slave into its master. That actually, when you go to the rules of Hammurabi, those we usually compare to, but there are also many other codex of laws of the ancient East, different rules that they found. The rules said the exact opposite. If someone hid a slave that belongs to someone else at home, he would get a death sentence. It goes the exact opposite. The rule was that if you do that, you deserve a death sentence. If you hid someone in a slave that belongs to someone else, you are not allowed to ruin society. Because if you do that, the whole society was based on slaves and trades and such. So if you come in and underline the right of the master, you are ruining the whole system. We need the stability. We need that was the view of people around. And the rules was the exact opposite. You had to, when you find it, and if you if you found a slave and brought it back to its master, you would have get paid a couple of shekel, like an amount. And if you don't know who he belongs to, then you're supposed to deliver him to the authorities that will interrogate him and find out who he belongs to. That were the rules of Hammurabi. And I understand the logic behind it. So it sounds very nice when we read it here, that we take care of the slave, but it's not a natural thing. We have to remember it's revolutionary, a revolutionary idea that you're turning him back, that you don't turn him back. That you're supposed to look at him, and he was probably treated bad because there's a reason he fled. We don't know what the reason. Torah doesn't say about it anything. You don't ask what the reason he has fled. You have to save him, regardless, and you're not allowed to give him back. The exact opposite than any other nation around us, at least as far as we know from the different law codex that we found around. Now let's go to how you treat them, because one thing is you save them, but it doesn't mean that you give them everything they need. That I think that's where you are going ahead, Moshe-David, right?
I just felt that what you said now is very, very, very relevant to common day dilemmas in terms of refugees and the ratio of refugees in a society, and whether they're going to destroy the society. They're coming from a lower, socioeconomical background usually. Never mind the racism that is right that could be there within under as a
what you're trying to say
part,
is that Ukrainians are whiter than Syrians.
What I'm saying is that I'm just being a bit careful, but I'm saying that underlying a lot of these discussions that we sometimes have regarding refugees and the ratio in society, and etc., it could be racist. But what we see here in the Torah, I think it's fascinating, because if we read the pasuk that you read before, so such individuals shall live with you in any place they may choose among the settlements in your midst. In other words, you ask them, okay, well, where were you thinking of living? You give them a card and you say, well, these are your options. This is the best part of town. And I think also in terms of when you talk about again, I'll take this to a question of integration, but by putting the refugees at the outskirts of the town and creating their own refugee areas, that in itself is not allowing them to be a part of the society. Whereas the Torah is telling us, you shall put them, remember who we're talking about. We're talking about a slave who's run away with nothing, has nothing, and he shall sit with you. And a question that is brought down is this a Jewish slave? Is it not a Jewish slave? Is it any slave that we're talking about? But here, he shall live amongst you in the place where he chooses, in be'echad she'arecha batov lo, in a protected place. It says within the gates. In other words, a protected place, in the best of places, wherever he pleases. And lo toneno, you shall not ill-treat them, or you shall not act wrongly in any sense towards them. Yes.
Now that's amazing. Lotonenu is like, it's as if you owe him something, right? You're not allowed to deceive him. You're not allowed to mistreat him. And it's like, you're giving him a place, you should just say thank you, right? It's if you bring back to our society today, we say these refugees should be grateful for everything they get. The Torah comes here. No. You're not allowed to deceive him. Like, you can't show him a place and don't tell him about the other place because you have a plan that you think maybe it's better for him. No. You're not allowed to mistreat him. You have a responsibility to go beyond just helping him. It has also a negative, like a mitzvat lotas of you're not allowed to I'll say in a modern language, you're not allowed to trick him. You have an obligation to not only to give him a refuge, but also take care of him in the highest ones. And if you send them, you in Denmark, go to send him to one of the cities in Jutland, or let's find a place that we won't feel his presence too much. No. In the places that he chooses, and we're not allowed to place him in a wrong place. Like that would be also mitzvat lotas, say we're doing something wrong if we do it.
And again, there could be a difference in when one is coming alone, because this is all an individual, whereas it's another question. In other words, there is a cultural gap there that may be, and it's always delicate, sensitive issues. In other words, what do they preserve from what they are bringing with them, and not only integrate in. But this is basically talking about caring for them. But if we go to the next source, there's a very famous book written by Maimonides that is called Moreh Nevuchim, the Guide for the Perplexed. And this book was questioned by some, whether it should be published even, or whether it should be read. But anyway, as everything today, it's open, non-censored on the internet. So those very harsh debates about this book are no longer there, but it's always interesting when you say you can't read this book. Of course, everyone's going to go and read it. So here we can read from the Maimonides' explanation towards some of these laws. And he says as follows: the precepts contained in the laws concerning slaves likewise prescribe only acts of pity, mercy, and kindness to the poor. It is an act of mercy to give liberty to a Canaanite servant for the loss of one of his limbs, in order that he should not suffer from slavery and illness at the same time. The law applies even to the case that a tooth of a slave has been knocked out, much more to the mutilation of other limbs. He could only be corrected with a rod or reed or the like, as we have stated in Mishnah Torah. Well, it's all relative, but only with a rod or a reed to the time was an act of mercy. Besides, if the master strikes the slave too hard and kills him, he's punished with death as for ordinary murder. If you remember, if you think, like Rav Yair was saying before, a slave was just your property. What do you mean? It's not murder. Of course, I can do what I want. I own the slave, and we know that that idea of slavery continued until not so long ago. So in that sense,
some places until today.
And definitely there's we like to imagine the world as if it's free of slavery, right? That's how we would love to see it. But so many of the products that we all use are based on basic slavery.
No, but you have all the, maybe we'll should come to our times later, but you have places also in the Western countries. We still have literally slaves in that, especially when you talk about prostitutes who are literally owned by the masters, who are what you call the pimps or such. It's slavery just like in old times. And they don't stand to, and they'll be sold and from one country to another. And right now in Ukraine, that's part of the situation. There's those who are in the highest risk are young women who are being used because of their need and such. And it's something that people try to be aware of, but it's still an issue. Sorry, but let's continue with the sources.
So here we come to the pasuk that we were learning before. Mercy is also the object of the law. You shall not deliver unto his master the servant that is escaped from his master. But it teaches besides a very useful lesson, namely, that we must always practice this virtue, help and protect those who seek our help, and not deliver them unto those from whom they flee. And it is not sufficient to give assistance to those who are in need of our help. We must look after their interests, be kind to them, and not hurt their feeling by words. Thus the law says, he shall dwell with thee even among you, in that place which he shall choose in one of your gates, where he likes it best. Thou shalt not vex him. So here we have another translation of mistreat or vex. This we owe to the lowest. I just want to stop before we go forward. And what the Maimonides is saying is that these are attributes that we are directly, the reason that they are towards the slaves is because that is where it's less likely that we actually think of doing so. But the fact that the Torah gives it for the slaves is not that it's about the slaves. It's supposed to develop this idea of mercy and kindness towards the poor amongst us. So in a sense, the Torah is just giving an example of how we must be kind and develop that mercy naturally ourselves. So let us go forward, and then I see there's some, we have some comments in the chat. We can take them soon. So basically, I think if you think of an example of what Maimonides is bringing forward here, sometimes you act out of mercy and you're willing to help. But I'll just give a simple example. Imagine you offer someone a ride, and you didn't really want to offer the person a ride, but you see that the person says, no, thank you. Okay, great. You get in your car and drive off. Or do you really want and make sure that the person doesn't need a ride? In other words, sometimes people do need help, but they're not willing to outstretch their hands, as we said before. So in that sense, to be stubborn about the help, that you really want to make sure that it's something that you're not only offering them help, you're looking actively after their interests. And we just had this discussion again about so countries are doing wonderful acts, and you were less positive about them, Rav Yair, but Israel has opened its doors, and there are refugees coming. So what do you say? Well, I put them up in a hotel. They should say thank you, and that's it. Or do you actively go and realize what it is that they need. Okay, in other words, are you going to invite them for a Shabbat dinner to your home? Are you going to actually see what they need? Many times everyone gathers, wants to feel so good about themselves. You put these boxes, all the schools here now have boxes that people are putting stuff in, which is fantastic. But what are they going to do with 300 bags of pasta? Whereas what are their basic needs? Maybe one of that thing is to actively look after their interests, is what the Rambam says is the point here.
We can see many times that the main issue with I'm sorry to go out from the sources to reality, but the need of stability is extremely important for many of these refugees. I heard the interviews the last days from people who were refugees from the wars in the Yugoslavia, from Bosnia and Herzegovina, who came to Denmark and to Sweden and the other places, and they got the permission they got to come was very it was only for a couple of years, where they didn't know if they couldn't at all seek for asylum. They could come, but they couldn't stay in Denmark, for example. I know the rules in Sweden are very different, but it's amazing to hear how much that was a constantly a problem for them, because they went from one side, they were all the time occupied with what's going on back home. For the other side, we told them that you're just here until you go back. So you don't try to create a life here. And so these people really needed stability, especially also when they have families and children and such. This is a huge need, the need of knowing they have a stable place, a safe place that you can stay at, and understanding that this is a need. I will say the same thing applies, of course, for the people today, that we need to look at their needs, and not only what we assume they need.
I mean, looking back to our own very recent history in the Shoah, people who were taking in Jews and saving their lives were not, they sometimes joined their families. They became a part of them. The wonderful story in Albania that you have, in which they were brought into the homes dressed up as Muslims and became a part of their families, so much so that they couldn't understand who was and who was not Jewish, and they managed to save the lives of every single Jew who came in. But even thinking, when you're in a war situation, for example, maybe different than the pasuk here, but similar to today, you're rationing out your own food. You don't have what to live off of. And then someone comes into your home and starts living there with another 3, 4, 7 kids, and is there for 6 months, for a year, for 2 years, for 4 years. And the amount of gratitude that we must have for those who did that, I think, not only, never mind risking their lives every single moment that they were doing so during the
I can take
Shoah.
a personal story of, as you said, our own story. My great-grandfather, all of my family, of course, were saved together with many Danish Jews in the Second World War. And one of the beautiful story they had, that my family went to a home of a priest, and there were quite a few Jews who came along, and the priest came to my great-grandfather, Marcus Melchior, and he asked him, he knows that now the very special Jewish high holiday, can he make something special to make them feel the high holiday? Now, luckily for him, the very important high holiday was Yom Kippur, so there wasn't so much food to prepare for that special day, but still, my great-grandfather told the story many times, because he said it was amazing to see how this person, who not only hid Jews at home and took care of them, but also tried to find out what is there something extra of their needs that he can help with. And that is a story I grew up on, that people who thought of our needs, and not only our need from our point of view, not only our physical, what a refugee need, but what do these people, the specific people here with the Jewish need, what do they need?
Just to follow up on that story, on a personal story, which is not about me as a refugee, but when I came to Malmö, and
it's a kind of a refugee.
Yeah, sort of as a refugee, yeah. But when I came to Malmö, I was actually the first Rosh Hashanah that I was there. You can imagine the preparations of the synagogue and the community and the meal, and we had many people, and etc. etc. And then I get a call, and I said that I'm being asked urgently to come to the police station. So I had no choice. And I said, can it wait? And they said, no, we're sorry, but it's and the police chief in Malmö wishes to see you. So I was accompanied to the police station, and I came in. I had no idea. And I walked into the room, and all of the lieutenants and everyone was standing around. And on the table was an apple and a jar of honey. And they said, we understood this is your tradition. We wish to bless you, and we want to, can you tell us what this is? And I explained to them about a sweet new year, and we made the blessing and shared. I think that idea that you brought forward of how much a difference that actually makes to see the person and make them realize that, that they should feel amongst you. I think, and it really connects to this pasuk. But then the question that comes out of what we've seen so far, is it specifically that we should care for the poor? I mean, maybe that's a specific idea, again, maybe connecting to some Christian motives of specifically caring for the poor as a special commandment, as something that we should do. The Maimonides, the Rambam, takes it exactly the opposite. He says as follows, I'm going to go back to the text. He says, this we owe to the lowest among men, to the slave. How much more must we do our duty to the freeborn when they seek our assistance? In other words, the fact that we do it, that we're told to do it towards the slave, is because it's less natural for us to do so. But of course, that is just an example to draw that kindness out of us. But how much more must we do our duty to the freeborn when they seek our assistance? But on the other hand, when sinners and evildoers seek our help, it must not be granted. No mercy must be shown to them, and the course of justice must not be interfered with, even if they claim the protection of that which is noblest and highest. In other words, the Rambam says, on the other hand, we have to be very careful, because this idea of kindness all of the time, also without limitation, can actually obscure justice that needs to be done. And justice, as we're taught, is what keeps the world together in place. So there's a balance there between our help towards the other, but those who not having mercy on those who by that mercy themselves will be giving, we will be taking part in the acts of cruelty that they are doing.
Yeah, I can add from that direction. If I continue to what we talked before about the comparison between Jewish law and an ancient law that existed at that time, that was the exact opposite. They had refuge places also at that time. If you came to the temple, there were some like holy places that were a refuge. So everyone who, regardless who he is, he could go there, and then no one could touch them. And the Torah doesn't accept that view. You don't have a refuge that the place itself gives like a free pass to anyone. No, it's about the person's needs, and about so a refuge place won't be a refuge place if that person is a convicted felon, or someone who had killed someone, or something like that. Then you take him out. It was the exact opposite. The refuge places were something that they could use as a society. And the Torah said, no, it's not a question what we can use as society. The question, can we see the person in need? This is what's crucial. It's not about the needs of society, it's about the needs of that person. That changes what society is, that it changes the focus of all these things. What refuge for them is not for us, because our refuge is about whoever needs it, not what we need as an area that will be a safe zone, safe haven for everyone that no one touches. No. Even there you could from my own altar, and you even have a case. Now a couple of cases later in the prophets with the kings about people who were slaves who were protected. A Nar Amaleki, someone who was a servant, a slave, and he was rescued into King David's army, and others, the people who ran away, that ran to the altar and were killed by the altar. Nothing saved them, because you can't flee if you are destined to death, if you are responsible if you shed blood, and that is the exact opposite. We may pay a price as a society, but it's because we want to create a different society. And I think this is what I really like also about the source you bring from the Rambam, because the question is what kind of a society we want to build. And that is not based only on what will be most convenient for us, or what will be it's exactly the opposite than all the excuses that we use when we don't do the right things. Because we talk about society need and we can't and such, that we have many good excuses. So the good excuse is what we had before. The Torah can say no. A society has to be built on the people's need. This is the crucial point of view that will change. We have to see what the needs of the people around us, and not the bigger picture. Usually the bigger picture is seen as an excuse not to do the right thing for the person who is in need.
We're not going to get into a conversation, but I just want to mention that coming up to Purim, we're reminded of a special mitzvah, which is almost on the contrary, that we have a mitzvah to wipe out an entire nation called Amalek. The reason given is because they were acting in an unmerciful way towards the Jewish people for no good reason. The first, you can say, acts of anti-Semitism directed at the Jewish people, and we have an obligation to completely wipe them out. And how does that fit into what we are seeing here in terms of developing kindness and mercy towards the other? Connects sort of to what the Rambam is bringing here at the end, but it's a whole conversation in itself, and I hope you look it up and learn it. This Shabbat is, the Shabbat before Purim is called Shabbat Zachor. We have a special reading that we read in the Maftir, which is a mitzvah to listen to go to shul specifically and listen and read about the mitzvah of wiping out Amalek. And the connection to Purim is that Haman was a direct descendant of the fact that was not followed properly. But again, we're not going to get into that, but I'm just...
But you could say, if you want to connect, Moshe-David, that the soul, when we talk about Amalek as the ultimate evilness, it is connected to the fact that they went only after the weak. Like the opposite than what we see in the picture here.
That's when I said unmerciful. That's when I went. It's exactly the opposite of what is developing here, and maybe that's part of the idea that such an element has no place. We can have mercy as long as it's within the context of what we're trying to develop as a society, as you said before. If we look further, we talked about refugees, we talked about slaves, but another part of society which was always on the weaker end, despite the fact that Torah tells many, many times that we must act with equality towards them, are the converts. And there's an entire Masechet, the Masechet Gerim, the tractate of converts, regarding special laws to the Gerim. And Gerim, there are different types of converts. And there's a convert, as we speak today, of someone who's converting and taking upon themselves the mitzvot. But then we have someone else who's living, a ger toshav, someone who's a convert in the land, who is taking upon himself the basic laws, the basic belief, but not and he has the right to live in the land, but he's not in that. He's still a ger toshav. He still has a permanent. He has a place in the land, but he's not accepting upon himself and not converting into Judaism itself. So what it says regarding his case. So he says, we do not settle him on the frontier or in an unhealthy district. Already you see that the Mishnah already understands that there's certain zones that if they're set up as migrant zones, that they become unhealthy. You have different parts of town, the wrong part of town, the bad side of town. But so you don't put him there, but you put him in a pleasant district in the center of the land of Israel. Part of the problems that we've been facing in the Beit Din is the fact that people who want to become part of the Jewish communities were set in the center of town, and today you have to be quite rich in order to manage to live there. So you see that same sense that someone is not able to. So the Mishnah is saying, no, you have to put him in the center of the land of Israel, where he can find scope for his occupation. In other words, he's weaker in society. So why do you make that even stronger by putting him where he will find it difficult to provide for himself? As it is stated, with thee he shall dwell in thy midst, in a place where he shall choose, in one of thy gates thou shalt not wrong him. So bringing the same pasuk that we brought before, you see here
with a new version, with a third translation option.
So this is like King James translation or something, but here you have here he is a place where I think she'umonato yotzet. In other words, if he's and also means that you have to know enough about this person in order to know about his occupation. I mean, that's something very basic in immigrant office. They ask, what is your occupation? But again, to take that and to actively look to see that he can find a place to live where he will be able to provide for himself.
Both of us remember, Moshe-David, from our childhood, that all the guards and all the cleaning ladies and all of these people, when we were children in school and such, they were all they were doctors and professors from the former Soviet Union who came in the 90s, and but then when they came to Israel, they couldn't find a job in their occupation, and they had to manage as cleaners or guards and different and they took job wherever they need. But they understood something deep, that the next generation will have the options, and they did. So, but you can see we're supposed to do even more.
To actively look after them, yes. Yep. So here we have the final source for today, which is from Sefer HaChinuch. Sefer HaChinuch is, we've mentioned, and it's been brought many, many times in the Shi'ur, because he gives reasoning for the mitzvot, which is what we have been trying to do this entire winter semester, to get into a deeper understanding about the mitzvot. So here the Sefer Chinuch brings this following regarding this mitzvah. So he says the following. He says, that which we mentioned is from the roots of this commandment, that God wanted for the honor of the land, that one who flees to there be saved from slavery, in order that we place the honor of the place into our hearts and fix the awe of God. May he be elevated into our hearts when we are there. And all of this is to help his people and to give them merit, as he is one who desires kindness. So we saw before from the Rambam was telling us that the idea of caring for the poor is so that we teach ourselves acts of kindness towards the poor and towards everyone. And in general, we have to be active about looking out for the other. But here the Sefer Chinuch takes it in a completely different direction. And what does he say? He says that God wanted for the honor of the land, that one who flees to there be saved from slavery. In other words, the whole description is that the land of Israel should be one in which one can find refuge.
You said before, a refuge, that the land is refuge.
That the entire land becomes a refuge, and that the name of Israel as the land of God should be one of freedom. That one should look at the land of Israel and say, that is the land of freedom. And in that sense, anyone who knows there, it's like a free zone. It's like, you know that once you cross the border there, you become free. So that you're striving, that you're running towards that land, and that's the namesake that it has in the world. In order that we place the honor of the place into our hearts and fix the awe of God. In other words, if this becomes a safe haven for the world, that every slave in the world knows I can run there and I will be free, that will make the place very respectful. And therefore, we will respect the land and the fact that it represents God even more so. And therefore,
it reminds me, you're the one who is closer to American society than me, but I grew up always on the home of the brave and the free, and the picture of the creation of the United States was a place many times for people who fled from Europe, from different. If there were troubles in the families or even thieves and stuff, they knew that they could become free when they came to the US. It was a haven for the free people. But I think that it's beautiful to see how what is the difference, that it both the land of the free, in the US, of the brave and the free, and the Torah and the Jewish tradition will say for the chesed, the free and the chesed of the kindness. So not the free and the brave, but the free and the kind. Can you create a place that it's not free? Whoever is willing to fight can find a place there. That's the picture of the U.S. as a safe haven. And I would say that the picture of Sefer Chinuch here comes and say the land of the free and kindness that gives. It's a place that gives place, not to the one who's willing to fight with brave, but the kindness, a place where whoever needs can be free.
I think also in terms of when we look at it as the land of the God, it's almost a sense that I'm getting from this passage from Sefer Chinuch, in which if you're walking in a place which is dignified, where everyone looks up to, you're walking next to someone who everyone looks up to, it makes you feel proud. And I feel that sense of proudness that Sefer Chinuch is saying, if you are part of a land which everyone looks up to, then you will be proud. And that is the land of the God. It's not in God we trust. We live in the land of the God. And if we live in the land of the God, that land is a land of freedom, a land of refuge, a land of justice, a land of caring. And in that sense, he says, the awe of God will be elevated into our hearts when we are there. And all of this, the ultimate result of all of this is that it creates a nation of kindness, a nation in which we are kind, from our relation to our children, to our parents, to our partners, to our city, to those who are in need. And then we see how far it goes, that even those who we've never known in our life who come seeking, that we outstretch our hand and we actively look to see how we can help them in the best of ways.
Yes.
I think
I can only say amen to that, Moshe-David.
So I think it does go back to coming out of the sources, brings forward a question for us at a personal level: are we doing enough for those in need? And Rav Yair, you said yes. You hinted at the fact that certain situations get more global attention than others in need, and thousands can die a day in other places, and it's not even noticed. And the politics that the geopolitics that fit into that, I would say. And then the other,
some of it is understandable, like because it is our neighborhood, and something that happened in our neighborhood draws more attention. So it's not only wrong because this is something we see, we can feel. We have I have Ukraine friends, and because it's part of the area here. So it is natural, but we have to be reminded that there are others who need that, and yeah, how much do we open when some other people they stand at the door?
and even more so, in other words, if there's donations going on, for example, there's a lot of fundraising and other things that are being done right now. So do I do it to feel good for my, that I've done it? Or do I actively look out to see how much I can do more to make sure? And I think from all of the sources today, there's a demand for us to take one more step in that direction, that it's not enough. Of course, you must do what you can to help, but take it one step further and say, how are they actually doing? Now I've received them. Now they've had a place. How are they with their occupation? How are they managing? What do they need? How can I help them? How can I make them feel at home?
Yeah, but I do want to use this case to remind that right now there are millions of Syrians in refugee camps around Syria who still did not come back home, and all of them have less than what we contribute right now to the Ukraine. So you can actually think, do we prefer to, like, we want to help Ukraine because this is what everyone talks about right now, but maybe we should try and reach out for those who no one talks about. Rohingya was a period and everyone forgot, but there are millions, literally millions in camps, in refugee camps in Jordan and in Turkey and in Lebanon who are there, and they need help too. So maybe if you decide to donate a sum of money, take at least half of that to these places too, because they really need it.
There's I'm trying to think. I've lost track of time with all of this, everything going on in the war. But I think about a month and a half ago, I met the chief rabbi of Poland, Rabbi Shudrich, and he was at the time running out to the Polish-Lithuanian border to try to help and just and reach the refugees there before the authorities did, so that he can give them blankets and coats before they were sent off with nothing. And I listened with admiration that that's what he was doing. And he was, as a chief rabbi of Poland, trying to get past the authorities so that he could get to the refugees on time. And there's a fantastic organization called HIAS, H-I-A-S, which is focused on Jewish on bringing together networks to help refugees. And this has been this is ongoing. for all of the situations that you have mentioned, and not only the specific one. And we have good friends there in that organization. Love to hear any comments that anyone might have.
Sorry for being so political. No, I'm actually not sorry.
It'd be fantastic if anyone, I mean, Rav Yair and I can talk all night, but you're just being nice and polite behind your microphones. So you're welcome.
I have one question.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Rabbi Melchior, you mentioned that, yeah, give to some of those refugees in Lebanon or Syria. But however, a lot of these refugee camps are run by UNRWA.
No,
Who is
I
the one
didn't
that-
talk about the Palestinians. I talk about the Syrians who are in refugee
Okay,
camps.
gotcha.
I do think that we need to help also the Palestinian refugees. That's something else. But right now, I actually meant those who are still in tents. We have millions of Syrians who are still lives in refugee camps in Turkey and in Jordan and in Lebanon. The Palestinian refugee, I don't want to go to the political aspect. Right now, I'm talking about people who live in tents in refugee camps around Syria and are not allowed to come back from the Syrian, from Assad, Imach Shmo. It's
I would
yeah.
also say, remind us that when we were learning about the mitzvah of tzedakah, we learned that it is okay to see how your money is being used and how it's being filtered and what is trustworthy. And therefore, that is the job, we said, of a rabbi of a community, to be that source, so that if you have the needy, for example, who come, they can go either to the rabbi or to a board in the community whose job it is to check the person's credibility. So in that sense, even with these other refugee organizations, it's definitely a right that you have and should, to make sure that your money is going to the right sources, and actually that it's getting there, because check into the fundraising platforms as well. You can always find the information of what percentage is being siphoned off towards those platforms, which are maybe even using these very sad stories in a cynical way to make their own profits. Could be, there are some out there like that, and there's many who make even zero, or just take their basic.
But don't let it stop you from giving. It can't be used as an excuse. It doesn't mean you need to look better for
just look into it so that you can find a trustworthy source, and then with these refugee organizations who might be supporting others, and etc., as was mentioned here. So
I have a Norwegian friend here in Denmark. She lives in Denmark right now, but she opened schools for refugees of Syrian refugees. The organization is called 5 Schools because she had like the goal to open 5 schools, but she got a lot of support the last years, and then so now she already opened 10 schools in the refugee camps, and I can strongly suggest people who want to help them. I can show. Actually, the one who helped them most to find some richer people to help open new schools was a Jewish from the community in Denmark. So if people want to look for places, I can show them. Just like Hayas is a very good place to use it. But also the Dansk Flygtningshjælp is regarding helping these situations. Dansk Flygtningshjælp is still one of the best organizations in the world. Yeah.
And I know that I know that in Sweden, you discuss Centralråd, it is very actively involved with, and I'm sure in Denmark as well, and in all of the Nordic countries, that the Jewish community leadership is very involved to see what can be done to prepare our communities in case there are refugees that are coming our way, and also to just reach out and say, we're here, how can we help? And that is being done by the Jewish communities throughout the world in a very admirable way. So I think we take this further towards our own responsibility, towards our prayers, active prayers, that this situation and all of those in need, that Hashem, who is the provider for all sustenance, provide for all of the world, and that we live in kindness and bring ourselves forward as much as we can in that way. So thank you very much for joining this evening. Shalom ve'litraot.
Shalom.
Shalom.